If the US Open is the toughest test in golf, then there is no better place to play it than Oakmont Country Club. Located just 10 miles outside of downtown Pittsburgh, the 122-year-old club will have the world's best golfers second-guessing their game this week. To conquer Oakmont, you must have complete control of every club in your bag. The average fairway is only 28 yards wide, requiring precision off the tee. If you miss a fairway, you'll end up in 5-inch thick, wrist-breaking rough, or one of the course's 168 bunkers. That's an average of 9 bunkers per hole, not to mention the infamous Church Pew's bunker that stretches over 100 yards in length and 40 yards wide. Even if you drive the ball well and feel good with your irons, everything can fall apart when putting. Some greens are massive, while others are small. If one is wide, the next is narrow. Oakmont's greens are so firm and fast, they literally led to the invention of the Stimpmeter, the device that golf courses all over the world now use to measure green speed. In the last 9 US Opens held at Oakmont Country Club, only 27 out of 1,385 players have finished under par. That's less than 2%. Arnold Palmer famously said, "You can hit 72 greens in regulation in the Open at Oakmont and still not come close to winning." Oakmont's challenging layout is only part of what makes the course so interesting, though. As players walked into the clubhouse this week, they could feel the club's history and tradition. Wood-paneled walls are lined with memorabilia from the 1900s. Each locker still has the secret compartment that members used to store alcohol during Prohibition. There are working phone booths in the locker room, but no air conditioning. And when players sit on the wooden benches to put on their shoes, they can literally see old metal spike marks and scuffs from the likes of Bobby Jones, Walter Hagen, Ben Hogan, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and many other of golf's greatest players. Oakmont is so old that the government used eminent domain to construct a highway through the middle of the course in the late 1940s. Due to the course's elevation, the Pennsylvania Turnpike's 2.5 million weekly travelers wouldn't even know the course is right next to them, outside of a few banners on a chain-link fence 20 feet above them. But players and fans still have to cross the bridge to reach holes 2 through 8. The USGA even threatened to remove Oakmont from tournament consideration due to a logjam on the bridge during the 1994 US Open. But then, hedge fund billionaire and Oakmont Country Club member Stanley Druckenmiller financed the construction of a second bridge for about $750,000, and all was forgiven. But that also doesn't include the $75,000 fee that the authority charged the club to close down the highway for 20 minutes during construction. Oakmont is such a fascinating venue because it has withstood the test of time. While other championship courses are buying up land to deal with the increased length of the modern game, Oakmont's layout looks nearly identical to what it did 100 years ago. To understand how that's possible, you first need to understand Oakmont's history. In 1903, a man named Henry Phones purchased 191 acres of farmland 10 miles outside downtown Pittsburgh for $78,500. The land was barren with train tracks running down the middle, but Phones didn't care. It was perfect for what he needed. Phones had recently become wealthy after selling his business to Andrew Carnegie, the richest man in America at the time. But when a doctor misdiagnosed him with a terminal illness, Phones thought he only had a couple of years to live and decided to enjoy life. Phones traveled to Scotland to play some of the world's best golf courses, and when he returned to the US, the 47-year-old made it his mission to build an unrelenting link-style course in the hills of Pittsburgh. In 1903, building a golf course wasn't exactly easy. There were no tools or excavators, everything was manual. Phones marshaled a crew of 150 workers with about 24 horses and mules. They dug 12 holes in 6 weeks during the fall of 1903, paused for the winter, and then finished the remaining 6 holes by the following fall. Since they couldn't easily just level out the land, they incorporated the natural slope into the course's design. Oakmont Country Club officially opened on October 1st, 1904. The course measured over 6,400 yards and played to a jaw-dropping par of 80. It was the only course that Henry Phones ever designed, but one that would become iconic in the history of the game. Phones had a clear design philosophy. He believed, quote, "A shot poorly played should be a shot irrevocably lost," end quote. In other words, every mistake should carry a hefty penalty. Deep bunkers, sharp contours, thick rough, it all played a part. Rumor has it that Phones would roam the course during the day, observing where mishit balls landed. If a player didn't get punished for a poor shot, Phones would instruct groundskeepers to install a new bunker where it landed. That's why at one point there were over 300 bunkers on the course. These also weren't just any bunkers. In addition to coarse river sand from the Allegheny River, Henry and his son William invented a diabolical maintenance trick: furrowed sand. Oakmont's crew used 50-pound steel rakes with 4-inch teeth to comb the sand into furrows. If a player hit it into a furrow, they would find a mound of sand right behind and in front of their ball, forcing a sideways wedge shot out. It was essentially a penalty shot, sticking with the theme that no poor shot goes unpunished at Oakmont. Oakmont's furrowed bunkers were so extreme that players actually threatened to boycott the 1953 US Open if something wasn't done. Eventually, a compromise was reached. The club agreed to stop furrowing the fairway bunkers, but they continued to do it on the greenside bunkers for a while. Those steel rakes still hang in the clubhouse today. For its first 50 years, Oakmont remained true to Phones' vision, featuring sprawling views and no interior trees. But after the 1952 US Open, writer Herbert Warren Wynn described Oakmont as a, quote, ugly brute of a course, end quote. He said that it lacked beauty, and the members were stung by this criticism, so they embarked on a beautification plan. Over the following decade, Oakmont planted over 5,000 trees, including oaks and pines, throughout the course. These trees drastically changed Oakmont's character. The link-style course evolved into a typical parkland course, characterized by narrow, tree-lined fairways. The trees might have pleased the eye, but the grass struggled due to the lack of sunlight and airflow, and the strategic angles that initially made the course so great were compromised. Displeased with how the course changed over time, Oakmont's leadership decided to make a change in the 1990s. They wanted to remove the trees to return the course to its original design. Some members grew to love Oakmont's Green Cathedral though, so the grounds crew had to do this in secret. They began by removing trees, one by one, after darkness or in the early morning light, cleaning up the debris before anyone arrived. Eventually, of course, caddies and frequent members began to notice that trees were missing, but it was too late at this point. Members threatened the board with lawsuits, but they held firm. Between the mid-1990s and the early 2000s, about 10,000 trees were removed from Oakmont's property, restoring the course to its original treeless interior. Gil Hands was then hired to restore Oakmont in 2023. He sat with the club's curator of collections for an entire day, reviewing every historical photograph he could find of the property, including aerial drawings. They brought in heavy machinery to redo every bunker and every green, with the final result adding 300 yards of length and 24,000 square feet of green expansion. Today, Oakmont is one of the most challenging courses in the world. The USGA rating this week is 78.1 on a par 70 course, with a slope of around 150. That means a 10 handicap golfer would be targeting a score in the 90s from the championship tees. Oakmont does make a few changes for the US Open. Notably, the grounds crew extended the Church Pew's bunker by about 15 yards after players were able to hit tee shots over the penal area in 2016. It takes 4 to 5 guys about 45 minutes to hand rake the entire Church Pew section, and Oakmont will bring in 150 volunteers to help this week. That's in addition to a full-time maintenance staff of 45 people during peak season. Oakmont's rough will also look different this week. At the club's last US Open, players were presented with a graduated rough. Off the fairway, there were about 6 feet of 1-inch thick rough. This then transitioned into an intermediate cut of 3-inch rough for about 20 to 25 feet before the thick stuff at 5+ inches took over from there. But this year, it's even more challenging. Oakmont is now transitioning directly from 1-inch thick rough to 5-inch thick rough. The rough is still mowed because if you stop cutting the grass and just let it grow to 5 inches, the grass would lie over itself and the ball would sit on top. So, by incrementally cutting the grass up to 5 inches, the individual blades of grass stand tall, causing the golf ball to fall deep into the rough. A typical day for the grounds crew at Oakmont runs from 4:30 in the morning until 7:30 at night. Dozens of employees hold turf management degrees or are actively pursuing them. The truth is, working at Oakmont is like receiving an MBA from Harvard Business School. The club has remarkably low turnover. There have been just 8 head golf professionals over the last 120 years, because the course is always maintained in championship conditions. It doesn't matter if the US Open is tomorrow or in 10 years. Oakmont members expect to be tested every single round. Oakmont may be a country club, but it's really a golf club in the purest sense. More than a third of the club's members carry a single-digit handicap, and the club never closes for weather. Rain or shine, cold or hot, it doesn't matter. Oakmont is ready. That's why Lee Trevino famously said, there's only one course in the country where you could step out right now, and play the US Open, and that's Oakmont Country Club. As you watch the US Open this week, pay close attention to the details. The way players pace around putts, taking extra time to read the subtle breaks. How they choose to attack Oakmont's 300-yard par 3 8th hole. The grimaces on their face when they find themselves in a bunker or that infamous 5-inch thick Oakmont rough. Every shot is a decision, and every decision has consequences. That right there is the magic of Oakmont. Oakmont's significance in golf history can't be understated. Earlier this week, Dustin Johnson called it the most challenging course he has ever played, even though he won the US Open at Oakmont in 2016. Then, Ben Griffin took it a step further, saying he would be happy with a score of 4 over par if you gave it to him before the tournament began. Oakmont is not just a golf course, it's a living museum of American golf. Unlike some older golf clubs that stopped women from joining in their early years, Oakmont has welcomed female golfers from the start. Not only were they given the same facilities, but the women's locker room at Oakmont even has air conditioning, a feature the men still lack today. The clubhouse at Oakmont cost $38,000 to build, but it still evokes the same Scottish farmhouse feeling that it did when it initially opened in 1904. Ultimately, that's what this course is all about. After losing its identity for a period of time during the late 1900s, Oakmont has regained its footing. The world's best players will end the week with more bogeys than birdies, but it's just as much of a mental test as it is a physical test. This year's US Open will require patience and precision. Players must do everything well, from controlling the spin off their irons to navigating hundreds of penal areas. The last 6 US Open winners have shot a combined score of 47 under par, but don't expect that to happen this week. The winning score will probably be the highest it's been in 2 decades of the US Open, which is precisely what Henry Phones would have wanted. As Xander Schauffele said earlier this week, people don't turn on the TV to watch guys hit a 200-yard shot onto the green. They turn on the US Open to see a guy shooting 8 over par and suffering. Oakmont is ready to deliver on that promise. The only question remaining is who is up for the challenge.